be blown at any time during the attack. 1st Cav Division had one battle group assigned north of the river. The guys went up there knowing that they were the sacrificial lambs. If the attack came, their job was to hold long enough to blow the bridges. They knew that they weren't going to get to use the bridges. They were the heroes. They went up there knowing that, but they still went. To me, that's a hero. Knowing you have no choice to come back, but you go anyway. The same way that we all went, knowing the chances were that we weren't coming back. I don't consider myself a hero. But I do consider it an honor and privilege to have served my country, and I've walked with many heroes. I have had the privilege to know many heroes and call a lot of them friends. I've lost a lot of friends who were heroes. A lot of them over there on that wall. I still have trouble going to that wall, but I would do it again in a minute. And I'm sure most of you would too. I was told to bring this to an end on uplifting. I can think of nothing more to say that is more uplifting than to sit here and look at you and know that you all would do the same thing. We all would. There's no other thing I can say to you except I salute all of you. You're all my heroes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tips. It's a great honor to have you here today. Now I'd like to introduce the Lakota East High School Choir, who will perform My Country 'Tis of Thee in honor of our Korean war vets.
Our flag waves
Thank you, thank you. One more big round of applause for our Korean War veterans and for this choir that just, the Lakota East High School choir that just performed this beautiful version of My Country 'Tis of Thee. Now it's a great honor for me to introduce you today to our Vietnam veteran, Mr. Gene Berry from St. Petersburg, Florida, Elks number 1224, was a Navy lieutenant during Vietnam. Would you please welcome Mr. Gene Berry?
Good morning. So, during the Vietnam era, I was served in the U.S. Navy on 2 ships. I was the communications officer on an LST 1179, the USS Newport, and did some Phoenix flying. Now, if you see me be a little shaky here, it's because, not because I'm nervous, it's because I'm cold. So, I was a navigator on a guided missile destroyer, the USS John King DDG-3. And just as a side note, I read recently that they launched and commissioned DDG-128. So there have been 125 new DDGs since I was served on the DDG-3 John King. Now, I knew that I would not do a presentation about the Vietnam War justice if I didn't have some actual veterans who were in combat in Vietnam during their tour of duty. So I thought about it, and in fact, I have 2 friends, good friends, and they both went to Vietnam for tours of duty. But I never really knew much about what they had to say because they never really talked about it. Now, that was unlike me. I would tell my story. My family friends would ask me, "What did you do in the Navy?" And I'd tell them my story about how I navigated the 6th Fleet into Izmir. Or we were always on high alert when the Russians trawlers shadowed us in the Med. And the Russian airplanes flew low and slow over us to try to get us intimidated. And then what about when I navigated the ship across the Atlantic several times with just a sextant, the sun and the stars? Because we didn't have the same capabilities as we have today that a small pleasure craft has. So what I did was I reluctantly thought about how I would approach them so that they would be willing to tell me their story. Now, my first hero and friend is Lance Corporal Johnny Miller. Now, Johnny was willing to send me an email. He was uncomfortable sitting with me face to face. So I was thankful for that. And what I'd like to do is just tell you some of the highlights of his email to me. Johnny joined the Marine Corps in March of 1966, went through normal basic training, and due to the needs of the service, he was sent to Scout Dog training. When he completed that training, he was sent to Camp Kaiser in Vietnam. He said that in his email that after a couple of weeks in the bush, he was ambushed, and he was not wounded, but his dog was killed. And because his dog was killed, he was reassigned to what they call the MACV unit, the Military Assistance Command. And the Military Assistance Command was set up to secure the bridges, the airports, and some surrounding villages out of Da Nang. So he tells me in his email a story about he and his sergeant who went to a village to do some security work. And the sergeant sent Johnny back to Da Nang to get some supplies that they needed. That night, the mortars hit the village and the sergeant was killed. And Johnny had to identify the body. So because his dog was killed, he also began to do other village work. And again, he worked in the village, did his thing, went back to Da Nang, and then found out 2 nights later that there was an attack in that village and 2 other Marines were killed. So the story of Johnny Miller, Lieutenant Lance Corporal Johnny Miller, is that he's a survivor. And thankfully he is, because frankly, he's a great friend, and he's great at the VA, where he's a volunteer at the Elks office. And I know that they're thankful at the lodge to have him, because he's always a contributor at all the different activities they have there. So my second hero and friend is Lieutenant Phil Harloff. And Phil spent the whole year of 1970 in Vietnam. Phil was a platoon leader who led about 20 men, and he would go out for about 8 to 23 days in total. And his mission was to seek and destroy, particularly the bunker complexes that were in Vietnam. They would identify the telltale signs that there was a bunker complex in the area. They would see trees that were freshly cut and provisions piled up. They would send a forward observer. The forward observer would report on the activity, and then Phil would direct air support to seek and destroy the enemy. On April 18th, 1970, they came across a very large bunker complex. His platoon and another platoon came to see what they could do, and they sent in a forward squad to look and see about the forward base that they had discovered. The squad was ambushed, 2 were killed, and 2 were wounded. After that, a big gunfight started, and Phil earned on that day the Bronze Star with Review for Valor. So he was kind enough to give me his commendation for that action, and I would like to read it to you. First Lieutenant Harloff distinguished himself by exceptional heroism in connection with ground operations against an armed hostile force in the Republic of Vietnam, 18 April 1970, while assigned to the 199th Infantry Brigade. On that day, Lieutenant Harloff was leading his platoon on a company-sized operation when his men were ambushed by an enemy force of unknown size. Despite the wounds Lieutenant Harloff suffered in the initial moments of the battle, he continued to expose himself to the intense hostile fire in order to direct his men in the evacuation of the wounded. He refused evacuation and led his men throughout the battle. His alert and aggressive leadership contributed significantly to routing the enemy and earned him the respect and admiration of all with whom he served. First Lieutenant Harloff's heroic actions were in keeping with the highest traditions of the military service and reflected great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army. Now, both Johnny Miller and Phil Harloff are heroes. They're good friends and heroes. I wanted to save one portion of Johnny's email to me because I know it would be meaningful to every Vietnam veteran out there. And I'll read what Johnny wrote. He said, when I returned to the States in January